Hi, this is Sumaya Kamani and Hilary LeBlanc, and you're listening to Off the Rack, where we explore the evolution of fashion, its history, trends, and the stories shaping its future.
We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples.
So this week we'll be speaking with Shayne, Amanda, and Lolitta. Winnipeg-born, Toronto-based Shayne Stephens is one of Canada's leading men's fashion authorities. The former host of ET Canada's Style Scout, Shayne also consults for brands including Dior, Versace, Omega, among others, on regional marketing strategy, and has recently gone back to his roots, now writing columns and features on men's fashion and lifestyle for the Toronto Star, The Kit. Amanda is a creative director working in the mediums of fashion, film, and photography. Amanda is of Anishinaabe and has Western European ancestry. Amanda currently lives in Vancouver, where she primarily works in the film industry as a costumer and as an international celebrity stylist. Amanda is passionate about celebrating Indigenous talent in the fashion industry and believes in the values of matriarchy and mentorship and collaboration, along with conscious growth. And last but not the least, Lolitta is an essential figure in Quebec's fashion industry. A journalist, editor, and columnist for nearly 20 years, she is also an expert in secondhand fashion, a passion she has indulged in since her early adolescence, long before the movement exploded. Her unique style also attracted the attention of the Globe and Mail, which included her in the first ever list of best dressed people in Canada. So how is everyone doing? And I'm going to actually start with learning a little bit more about what you guys do and a little bit about your passions. So if you could speak to that, and maybe I could start with Shayne, if that's okay.
Sure. What do I do now? Currently, I work for Southern Glazers, which is a distributor of alcohol. So I work with Remy Martin. I work on a product called Louis XIII or Louis XIII, and work on that brand for Canada. And then I do a bunch of consulting on the side. I spent a lot of years in fashion, marketing director at Saks Fifth Avenue, Holt Renfrew. Luckily built a great network over those years. And so I'm able to kind of keep my feet in the fashion world by consulting. And what am I into right now? Golf. As weird as that sounds, COVID hit. There was nothing else to do with clients, and I started golfing. So I'm now a golf addict.
Oh, brilliant! I love golf, even though I'm really bad at it, but I love it. What about you, Lolitta?
So I live in Montreal. I've been a fashion journalist for almost 20 years now, and I think I wanted maybe to add a few little things in the bio, which is also my passion. But I teach at Collège La Salle. I teach fashion history and trend analysis. And the project that I'm the most passionate, if I can say, about, which is happening right now, is that I wrote a TV show called Tout le monde s'habille, which means everybody gets dressed. And it's a fashion and society magazine. So we look at all sorts of subjects, of themes, but with the angle of clothes and fashion. So it's very interesting. And there's been 6 episodes already aired, and there's 6 left at the end of March. And it's great to be able to put this out there. A lot of people have this kind of very superficial, they see fashion as something that is very superficial. And it was actually hard to get that show on because of that. But a lot of people seeing it are kind of changing their minds, and that really makes me happy.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. Kudos to you for that. And last but not least, Amanda, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you.
Hi. Okay, so gosh, I've been working in fashion since I was a teenager. I started out as a stylist assistant in Toronto. My first job was working as an assistant to Roz Griffith Hall, who's one of Canada's top stylists. She's just absolutely incredible, still out there crushing it. We actually had lunch not that long ago when I was in town for TIFF, which is so cool because I really don't know how she put up with me. I was like such a nightmare. but as you are when you're 19 years old. But that was a very long time ago. After Toronto, I lived in Vancouver for 6 years, where I worked as I was mostly kind of doing modeling and acting. I've been in a couple of really famous Canadian music videos. I'm not going to tell you which ones, though.
We want to know.
You recognize me anyway. But I think I did about 9 music videos at that time, so it was kind of a video babe.
Wow.
And I started to kind of dig in a little deeper to kind of working behind the scenes. And behind the camera at that time, got interested in styling. I moved to London in 2007 to attend a handful of short courses at London College of Fashion, or not London College of Fashion, sorry. It's linked now. At the time, it was Central St. Martin's. I think now the short course is for LCF.
Right.
But I took an art direction class. I took marketing for fashion. I took fashion journalism and a handful of other things, and just started working. And I happened at that time to bump into someone who I had met in Vancouver, who was actually from Winnipeg, and his name was Mark Fast. And he ended up becoming a super darling of the London Fashion Week scene. We got New Gen, our second season after his graduation, and things really exploded for us. In 2009, which I was about 4 months pregnant with my first, we used some plus size models and put them on the catwalk, because it was the anniversary of London Fashion Week. And it made a big splash. Unfortunately, some of the attention was negative. A lot of it was really positive, and it kind of shot Mark up into a entirely different stratosphere. And I think for me, that was like a real watershed moment, because I realized what is really important to me in fashion is diversity. So coming back to Vancouver, I've been home actually almost 2 years to the day. And it's been a bit of a slow burn getting started again. I went back to kind of doing day calls in the film industry and to working on my photography portfolio. And I kind of stumbled back into styling work with some opportunities to do some red carpet styling, which then gave me the opportunity to showcase some of the really incredible Indigenous fashion that I've been exposed to since I've been home on Turtle Island. And that's a big passion of mine, as is attending the Downtown East Side Sweat Lodge, which is an outreach for our who are affected in arguably one of Canada's most hard-hit neighborhoods. So I do that as much as I can. It happens monthly. But yeah, just getting out and being on the lands, going to the beach, spending time in nature.
That's amazing. Yeah. Vancouver has a lot to offer too. So I'm glad that you're doing all of that. And I'm really happy that we have a very diverse panel today to talk about the regionality of fashion, because we have representation from Toronto, Vancouver, Quebec, 3 of the fashion hubs. Among others, obviously. So I would love to know how you guys think the main cities, or the metro cities, or the different regions of in Canada affect the overall fashion industry, or what kind of contributions have Vancouver, Toronto, and Quebec have had on the entire industry of fashion. And maybe we can start with you, Lolitta, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Well, obviously, I'm going to, speak for Montreal and Quebec first, because this is what I know best. But I feel that definitely the fact Quebec is kind of a little country on its own, in the sense that just the fact that we do speak French makes it very different. And I know that, marketing agencies and different brands, when they talk to Canadian journalists, they're always going to have a different pitch when it comes to Quebec. We kind of have like an industry that's a bit different, mainly because of language. So I think we have a particularity. And I think that obviously, like other places in Canada, we're very influenced by North America. But in the case of Montreal, there's also a very big influence of Europe in French, France, and we can feel it a lot in the way people are. There's a There's a inshallah. Oh God, I'm going to be looking for words in English. But people are very easy to approach in Quebec. And when it comes to fashion, what it gives, in my opinion, is that there's a very big liberty in how people express themselves through fashion, whether how you dress, but also how you design. And a lot of designers here sometimes, if I can say that, maybe lack a little bit of the business side, because they're a lot about expressing themselves. So there's a lot of designers that I'm sure you've heard of, like Denis Gagnon and Tristan Réel and the guys from Untitled, Renata Morales, Marie Saint-Pierre, Philippe Dubuc, really great designers. And some of them, of course, are doing really well. But I think that there's this kind of limitless creativity that is here. And the fact that people are so approachable. And I often get that there's not a lot of judgment, which is really great, because it makes it easy for people to express themselves. And maybe one last thing that I would say is that I've been doing street style pictures for a long time. I used to have a street style blog, and people would often ask me, wouldn't you want to be in London or in New York to do this? And I would always tell them that there was never one day that I didn't cross somebody that had exceptional style, in my opinion. And once again, I feel that is very representative of this kind of liberty because of lack of judgment, and that represents Montreal well.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell people who ask me what fashion is for you, I always tell them fashion is not a specific design or a specific way you have to be. Everybody has a different language they speak, and fashion is one of the languages they can speak. So it's a form of expression. So whatever you're comfortable in, whatever you're confident in yourself in, that's fashion for you. And it's great that you don't want to be in a place where you're judged, obviously. So it sounds like it's comfortable. It's freedom of expression through fashion is something that's really prospering there. So that's amazing. Do you think it's the same in Toronto or Winnipeg, Shayne, or is it contributing in a different way?
I know Hillary wanted me to talk about Winnipeg a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what? If I look back, speaking to that first, I have to preface this by saying I haven't lived there in 20 years. Winnipeg did, back in the day, give us Mondetta, Chip and Pepper, a number of kind of cool brands. And it's always been a manufacturing hub. So I know that Montreal has always been a big manufacturing hub. That has slowed down across Canada, but Winnipeg, I think, is still has some manufacturing. A good example would be Freed, who did London Fog for years and years and years, and now has the faux fur coats. This is a fantastic, that's like a fourth generation manufacturing company. And even if you think about Silver Jeans, the denim and stuff, right? So there's still manufacturing in Manitoba. There's some factors that come into play there in terms of fashionability. You're talking climate. It's tough when it's minus 35 to look cool. So you're talking everything needs to be functional garments. Yeah. It's not a very stylish place. It's a very blue collar place. So there's not much interest, I'd say, in fashion. It's growing as kind of social media taken over. But I think it has contributed, but it's definitely the way that a small city would contribute to something. And there are some interesting things that are happening there. I think it is a place where the fashion industry can look to because of affordability and whatnot to be building. But, when you talk about fashion in Canada, arguably there's probably more head offices of Canadian brands in Montreal. There's just not that many Canadian vertical fashion brands. But here you've got all your national media. You've got probably the predominant it's probably the largest grouping of your influencers. It's probably your largest grouping of fashion schooling. You've got so there's a ton that happens here, right? Toronto, all the head offices, where did the retailers all come first? When we brought Saks to Canada, first place was in Toronto. Nordstrom, they went to Vancouver first, but that was just a function of where they were going to place it. So most of what you see in the fashion industry would be Toronto centric, I would think. And it's got a little bit of it's funny. I think Toronto is starting to feel a little bit more European in terms of it's a big multicultural society, and you're starting to see the fashion here is starting to reflect that, and that's a really cool and interesting thing to me. And it's young, and like fashion's cyclical. We've seen kind of wild and crazy give way to quiet luxury and stuff, but you're starting to see that stuff on the streets. Whereas a place like Vancouver, it's way more functional. It's way more architects and brands like that.
Yeah.
In Montreal, I would agree with Lolitta. Like it's always been a little bit more out there. It's a little bit more showy. Yeah, I think Toronto would be what I would say the sort of the hub in Canada of the industry.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very interesting how all of these cities in the same country have such different definitions of fashion. So it's very exciting to see. So I don't know what you think about Vancouver, but I think it comes somewhere in the middle of Toronto and Quebec. But I don't know what you think about that, Amanda.
I don't know. Okay, so I guess from my perspective, like, I'm gonna definitely agree with Shayne that there's so much happening in Toronto. It's so exciting to see the way that it's grown as well. And just in terms of like, even for me, going back to travel for work in the film industry, that kind of like, there's, all sorts of, really cool startups. When I was doing stuff, there were like the styling lounges, and I was meeting great designers, and that's how I met my friend Sean, who I think is a friend of Hillary's. Vancouver, I think, first of all, I would probably say that just like, I feel like for me, when I thought of Canadian fashion, I always thought of Montreal first. I just, as a person who is living in Europe and kind of looking at the Canadian industry from a distance, I think a lot of the fashion photography and a lot of the sort of like more kind of like avant-garde free creative was coming out of Montreal, whereas Toronto seems to really have but that may have changed while I was away. As from an outsider's point of view, whereas I saw Toronto as being kind of the hub of really kind of dialed in slick production, kind of like that's where there's I think the most industry. But I always saw Montreal as being like really creatively strong. Vancouver, like everybody else, I think a lot of people are very quick to dismiss Vancouver's influence on the fashion industry, which I feel is missing a beat a bit. I think Vancouver is kind of like, we're West Coast. We're like the LA of Canada. We have a different kind of vibe. I think that like it's impossible to ignore the functionality aspect of it. We've got brands coming in. Our probably most famous Vancouver brand is Lululemon, which is like love the brand. They're like undeniably successful. And undeniably recognizable all over the world. It used to be that if you were in a foreign city and you saw someone wearing Lulu, you knew she was from Vancouver, but it's not the case anymore.
It's not the case anymore.
And then we have like Aritzia that was founded here in Vancouver. So Brian Hill and like Hill's Dry Goods. And I think what Aritzia is doing is really like interesting and exciting. And just in terms of their offerings, again, when I was living in Europe and I would come home and visit Vancouver, or if I was in New York, I would always pop into Aritzia and get all of those kind of like luxury basic type items. And it was great too, because no one knew where I got them when I was in London. So I would just be like, oh yeah, it's really fancy and very expensive. But the thing about Vancouver that I'm learning as I dig in, when I kind of arrived here, I moved here not for professional reasons, but for personal ones, and I was like, I'll figure it out. There is a thriving fashion industry here. There's a thriving creative industry here. It's just very small. It's very small. It's like it's like there's a small piece of pie that's left over from Vancouver, and everyone wants a piece of it. And so for me, what I decided to do when I was kind of like just like looking around and talking to people about the industry here was just like, as much as possible, kind of look to create work versus like competing for what's available. I think what's really interesting about Vancouver is we do have a very different kind of like work-life balance as a community culture, just because of the nature of where we live. I mean, I'm looking at window there, and I've got a view of the North Shore Mountains, and I think our relationship with the landscape and with the water has a lot to do with kind of like how we present. So that you see that functionality, but you also see a lot of creativity. So some of the two most exciting kind of graduates of Blanche McDonald, which is a kind of a school here that teaches fashion design and styling and makeup, obviously, and hair. John Tay Cam is a Plains Cree designer. He's just, I think he's about to graduate from Parsons, or in his last year at Parsons in New York. He designed this beautiful sculpted duck feather bustier that was recently worn by Lily Gladstone, like within like days ago. And also we have another young designer here who just graduated from Blanche McDonald recently, and her name is Rolla Summers, and she does these incredible kind of early Molly Goddard-esque like tulle fantasy pieces that are really gorgeous. And you're seeing, we're seeing them in creative shoots on top models. Tasha Tilburg, who is from Chilliwack originally, she lives on one of the Gulf Islands. She's still represented by Liz Bell, her agent, longtime agent, who's based here. We've got Pamela Anderson, who's like made a huge splash at the Paris Fashion Week couture shows by wearing these like kind of beautiful kind of like luxury pieces and no makeup, and she's got this beautiful skin. And again, she's like, she credits that to moving back to her childhood home and this hardcore like West Coast lifestyle that involves nature. So I think that we've got a lot of great stuff going on, and also just wanted to shout out. There's a great photographer here who I'm obsessed with, and I don't know her name. Her name is Liz Rosa. She shoots for Vogue. Again, she's shooting a lot of stuff locally that's ending up in magazines all over the world. And then finally, Indigenous Fashion Week. It happens in Vancouver once a year in the fall.
Yeah.
Jolene Mitten is a force of nature. She was mentored by Pam Baker, who I've had the pleasure of working with on some red carpet stuff. Pam has been designing, very Indigenous, but also very wearable, ready to wear since the 1990s here. And now she's an advisor. Indigenous Fashion Week has grown so much. They took up 5 days at the Queenie Theatre. We had Indigenous brands from, kind of all over Turtle Island, but I believe also some from, as far away as New Zealand. So I think, we can safely call Vancouver like the hub for Indigenous fashion, which is amazing and makes me so proud.
Very well said. I loved everything you said, and I want to try to make it more interesting by asking something. I want to maybe learn more about your personal experiences that showcase the diversity of fashion across different Canadian cities. So anything that you've experienced in your personal life that you think really played a role in making Canadian fashion what it is today. And maybe we can start with you, Lolitta.
So something that you said something that's in my experience that has
your personal experience. Yeah, so
that
just something in your personal experience that showcases the diversity of fashion in different regions. So like, how is that playing a role in across different cities to kind of have a contribution in the overall industry?
Okay, well, obviously, once again, I'm just going to go to the project that I'm working on right now, because it was very intense. I got to see, in 12 episodes, so many things. And of course, the experience that I've had from other cities is being there and seeing it. And, with just hearing what we all had to say about our respective cities, I think that it's interesting to see that to me, when I look at Vancouver, I feel that it's very, what pops in. I didn't think right about Indigenous, but I'm happy you really mentioned it. But the outdoorsy, all the things that are like sports related and all of that. And in Toronto is very, very business oriented. And like I said, Montreal, I wish we could have a little bit of that a little bit more of that business. I don't want to make anyone mad here by saying that, but sometimes would really benefit from it. Because when I hear, about these designers dressing Lee Gladstone, and, in Toronto, of course, we've had many designers that have, like Greta Constantine, that we often see on red carpets and things like that. And I feel that in Quebec, I don't know what's the missing link that makes it, not happen. I feel that whenever somebody is going to really make it, they actually move. And it's very sad. And it makes me think about something that I've always had in my mind, is that I wish that one day, even though I understand that our country is so big, that there would be a way to kind of make a fusion with all our best talent to kind of have like a fashion week or a fashion showcase that would really showcase the best of the best. And I know it's hard because like let's say like France is like 3 times smaller just than Quebec. So obviously it's easy for them to kind of regroup everybody, and it's not the same for us. But I always wish that we had, I feel that this kind of unity would make us way stronger. I'm not answering to your question directly, but this is of my experience and of what I've seen. I feel that there's, like Canadian fashion could resonate way more. And when I hear other people, commenting on what is Canadian fashion, the thing that's going to come back, it's like, outdoors, like outerwear, and like people are going to say the Canadian tuxedo, but there won't be much more to that. And I think it's unfortunate because there is so much quality in different cities that I would love. I don't know if you, Shayne or Amanda, you think that's even possible with the, how big our country is. But I do wish that one day, instead of kind of being, some kind of competition, we used to have like at the same time Montreal Fashion Week, Vancouver Fashion Week, Toronto Fashion Week. And when you have, a smaller pond to get all these designers, I feel that unfortunately not everybody was at the same level. And what happens with that is that maybe the ones that are less strong bring the rest down. And anyway, so that's that's what I would say of my personal experience of going around in the country and kind of feeling that we're not represented as well as we could be.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Amanda? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, actually, well, a funny thing, back when I was living in London and working in fashion in London, we were very lucky that the High Commissioner of Canada to the UK at the time was a man named Jim Wright, and his wife Donna Thompson, who is an amazing advocate for carers for people living with disabilities, but also a keen fashionista. They would often host dinners for all the Canadians working in fashion at the High Commission. And somewhere, my friend Nicholas Malamphy from Cabine and Hudson's Bay Company has a great picture of us all. I went to one when I was like, I think I'd had my baby like 5 weeks before, and went, and of course that's the picture that everyone still has for the memories from that time. And it was really interesting because there were so many of us. There were so very many of us, and there were Tim Blanks would be there, and obviously he's a complete icon.
Yeah.
And I think that Lolitta is right. A lot of Canadian designers feel like they have to leave Canada in order to make it, and I think that also. And this is less true than I think it used to be. People kind of play down their Canadianness. I think that one of the biggest and most surprising things for me that I learned about Canadian fashion when I was working in Europe was my first time doing the Paris showrooms. The first time Nicholas, who was buying for the room at Hudson's Bay Company, came to see us because we were Canadian. We had a mutual friend who popped in to visit. I had like other designers like send their fit models like into our room to try and catch his attention. I'm like, what the heck is happening here? And what I found out from the other designers through word of mouth is that next to the buyers from the crazy Russian department stores, everyone with the big, expensive, gorgeous, over-the-top pieces wanted Nicholas to see their stuff because next to the Russians, he was the most likely to buy the most extra, crazy, over-the-top, expensive, special pieces, and that's because his clientele. There are women in Canada who collect fashion, who collect ready-to-wear, and who will buy it. And I think that it comes down, I think, sometimes to like just a question of marketability and a question of like reputation. Again, I feel as in terms of like, a local experience with that. I did buy leggings for the first time. I lived in London, so I already had hunter wellies, but I get like Vancouver has definitely had an influence on my style. I think it's definitely helped me kind of reconsider basics that I buy and that idea of like how do you be functional and still look cool and still look stylish. And I do feel myself sometimes like morphing into like into a real Vancouver mom, even though I've got a wardrobe full of like all kinds of But, again, I just really feel like there's a lot of talent in this country. I feel like there's a lot of talent in the city. And I feel like, a big, I don't know, this is going to maybe seem a little controversial, but I feel like a big part of kind of the marketing issue around, Canadians in fashion is Canadians themselves just like getting over this idea that we have to that we feel like we're underdogs, that we feel like we have to prove that, we're as cool as other countries or as cool as other cities. I think that there's like a disconnect almost. I think it's like, if you build it, they will come. So if we see ourselves, as, fashion powerful, as fashion influential, which we are, then that might change. But yes, the idea of kind of centralizing, some kind of, yearly showcase or something with the best of our talent is an excellent one. And it's something that people have tried on different occasions. And I think it's difficult, like I said, because, you find that a lot of the talent leaves and goes elsewhere, either whether that's for education or for job opportunities. But it's, creating an atmosphere where people feel proud to be welcome home to talk about what they're doing in fashion all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We should really own the kind of diversity of fashion that we have here. And maybe to the outside world, it's just jackets and like furs, or that's just one stream of fashion that they see. But there's so much that's just beyond those overcoats and jackets. And like you guys said, it's so different for all of these regions that we're talking about. And for me also, I think whenever I go to Quebec, I dress a certain way. Whenever I'm going to Vancouver, I dress a certain way. And it's every kind of fashion is different for every town, every city, every region. So it's very interesting as we talk about this. And also we have different fashion for different weathers. So I think we are capitalizing on that fashion, but also not talking about made in Canada or this is Canadian fashion as much as we should. And I'm very interested in learning about your perspective on this as well, Shayne. How has your experience been?
I mean, I think my experience from traveling the country and just sort of doing events or being in the different cities is that the West is very much active wear. The middle of Canada and Montreal is a lot of outerwear, obviously. And then Toronto is more the razzle dazzle. It's like more the marketing, the PR, the shooting, right? Like great photographers and stuff like that. There's still a lot of that in Montreal, but Toronto, I would say, would now be kind of the hub of it. I think it's important to keep in mind too that the fashion weeks that existed, I can speak to Toronto Fashion Week for sure. Like that was MG, right? Like they were here to make a profit. They weren't here to promote Canadian designers or any of that kind of stuff. They all say that that's what they were here to do, but they cut it the second that it wasn't profitable. So I think that we need to figure out a way to promote Canadian designers for sure, but in a fair way and not in a way where it's just a bunch of brands leveraging the fashion space, because everybody will leverage the fashion space, but they're really just, it's about them getting the name in front of it. Right. So it's marketing ploy. It's not actual concern about the industry. And I think that it would be great to be able to get a bunch of people together and a bunch of designers from across Canada to some sort of show. I think it's logistically tough. It's a massive country. It's expensive for these young designers to get to one city or another. So I think that's why we see small regional fashion shows pop up and, and I think that makes sense. And I think it's important. The problem is that even when it was IMG, there was no one of note or importance at these shows. It's a consumer show. It's not, right. It's not an industry show. No one's there buying anything. Right.
Yeah.
This is like the bankers want to look cool and bring a girlfriend to a fashion show. They buy tickets to it. That's what Canadian fashion weeks have predominantly been. Because if you're going to buy stuff, if you're wanting to sell to the world, truthfully, you're going to Paris, you're going to, Milan.
Yeah.
Right? This is the kind of stuff. And I think that's why you see these people want to leave, and they have to leave. So I would sit on panels and people would ask these questions about this type of stuff. And I'd say, well, I think people have to leave. But what Canadians aren't good at doing is looking back to Canada and coming back to help mentor and pull people up. So tons leave. D Squared, great example, right? They go, they make it big. They come back to do like the occasional retail pop-up thing. But for the most part, I can't really think of much that they've done back for Canadians or young kids up. So I think it's important to be honest and say, Canada's not going to be a place where you're going to break it, right? You're gonna have to leave here if you're going to make a go of it. This market is too small to make money doing what these people want to do. So I say go get as high up in the industry, whether it's marketing or merchandising or whatever, right? But don't forget about where you came from. So then step back in and try and help, right? And I think that's sort of what's missing is right now there's like this void. There's young talent and cool things popping off and whatnot, but there's not many people at the top of the companies, a lot of them that come from Canada that are reaching back to help bring Canada up. And I see that as a big, it's disappointing. And I think that that's something that's really going to need to have to change in order for things to get better.
Sorry, go ahead, Lolitta.
No, I was going to say, I'm happy to hear you say that, Shayne, because it's true that it's a bit kind of utopic to think that we could like build this fashion week and the right people would be there. And, you know, maybe it's about having like a Canadian day during New York Fashion Week or something like that. But I feel that like what we're missing, other than the fact that designers don't come back to mentor, is that kind of nurturing and pushing our designers. Because when we think, let's say, of a country like Belgium, that's a tiny country, but the designers that come out of there, obviously they have that proximity with France. But I feel that there's like a pushing, because we see so many of the Belgian designers that are the helm of really great, you know, fashion houses. And so I feel that yes, some of them need to come back, but we also need to do a bit more to kind of, you know, push these talents to get them somewhere. And I wish, maybe the Fashion Week is not the best thing, but at least, you know, like just really helping them out so that they, you know, their name gets out there.
There needs to be, I mean, I don't think any of us would disagree that there needs to be government investment.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like there needs to be significant government investment to make any of this stuff work. But I would say that right now, the way the industry is there's a bunch of very affluent women that support designers coming out of Ryerson. That's what it is. When if we're going to build an industry, we have to build vertical companies, because you need to be a Canada Goose that has a headquarters in Canada and has a marketing team and a PR. You need to employ a bunch of different people, not just push one designer through a system, right? So I feel like 100% there needs to be government investment significantly into manufacturing, into like taking the designers and teaching them and supporting them in building vertical companies. I think that that's really important, right? Like, I don't think it's definitely not simple. And to, I think Amanda's point earlier, like I remember I started my career actually in like writing and in editing and publishing. And I remember going to these Canadian publishing conferences, and I was just a kid from Winnipeg that like read GQ, really. That's all I knew about it, about anything. And I just remember always hearing everybody complaining, like, oh man, like the US publications get the front of shelf, and always complaining about like all the other publications in the world and how Canada never supported and stuff. And half the time the publications were garbage. Right. So I was sitting here going, I can see why you're not at the front of it. And I think we still have to admit that Canadian fashion is not where it is the rest of the world. It's still not there yet. Is there great talent emerging? Absolutely. Will it die? Absolutely. Because there's not government investment. There's not the programming in place to help these kids get to that next level. But we have to all sit here and go, government funding is going to be really important. These programs need to be blown out larger to incorporate and to build vertical companies. And we have to all just admit that I've sat numerous fashion shows, and a lot of times I can't make hide nor hair of what's coming down the runway. There's like 3 pieces that really should have been coming down the runway. So I don't think we're there yet. Is that a function of just less talent? Absolutely not. Is it a system that's broken? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I wanted to raise my point earlier as like somebody who's had the experience of kind of like working elsewhere and coming back, and you know, I wasn't really clear as to, you know, what path I was going to take forward. But I did think that I would get a warmer welcome than I got. What I found out is that with that point that I made earlier about that there being a slice of pie, there's one slice of pie and everyone wants a piece of it. And if they already have a piece of it, they don't want to share. There's a closeness because there's so little happening that if something is happening and something, is going on or something is moving forward, people don't want to leave and they don't want to share and they don't want to open themselves out to other people because there's like, if people, they've got a little kind of corner of the market that they can hold on to. Nobody wants to lose their ground. So it's not as collaborative as it could be, I think, just in terms of, and that's just born out of scarcity. It's a scarcity mindset. Yeah. And that's something that, if you kind of follow any sort of spiritual or like uplifting, that's the first hurdle is banish the scarcity mindset.
Right.
Focus on what you do have and be grateful for it and kind of and grow. And I just think that there's not enough of a supportive attitude kind of permeating.
Right. I think I'm not suggesting
collaborating.
I think your experience is a little bit different because I'm not suggesting that you coming back to live here and also then work in the industry. I'm saying go out, be successful elsewhere. That's amazing. And then don't move back, continue to live in New York and London and Paris and be who you are, right? You don't have to move back here, but come back to help pull up. So I agree. It's a small piece of pie here and nobody's going to want to let it go, especially if you're leaving and coming back. In fact, you're going to be blackballed because people aren't going to want to give that to you. Mm-hmm. But I'm suggesting that for a president like Tanya Galesic at Macaj, right? She's New York and probably a lot of Paris now. I want to see her back here more, but it also takes government funding and programming to get her back here to have these conversations, to help mentor people and whatnot, right? I'm not suggesting that she moves back and tries to become back in the industry here and try and take jobs. I'm saying go if you can go, get good at what you are and get influential, and then come back, not to live here, but to help people up through the system here because you have influence internationally at this point.
Yeah, like through guest lecture programs or even maybe some of these like kind of fashion prizes, galas. I mean, right. We definitely have a culture in Canada of, throwing really kick-ass fundraisers. Maybe that's an opportunity to kind of like raise funding towards getting some of our talent back to kind of like nurture and help grow some of our existing talent or our young talent.
100%.
Yeah.
But it's going to take not for profit to do it. Right now, everything that happens in Canada is for profit, right? Like, as far as I know, Canadian Art and Fashion Awards, it's like, I love it. I love what they do, but it's still for profit. I don't know what they've got. I'm sure they got foundation and stuff that they put money back in the industry for sure. But I'm just saying, like, you need government money to build an industry because they're not going to give you money unless you can show them a plan that says this is going to be what this industry is going to create in terms of like dollars. So, but right now, everything that happens in Canada, for the most part, feels like it's for profit. So we just need to have a better system in place to bring these people up and create this talent. There's a great brand like Better Gift Shop. Good example. Avi was a kid, used to go in and buy like stuff from him when he worked at Nomad. And then one day, little place pops up in Kensington Market, and I'm reading, and he's in GQ, and he's like got something at Dover Street Market, and he's putting hot dog carts with like T-shirts in all the Dover Street Markets around the world. Like, great brand, cool idea, cool concept. Little things good ideas can translate, but it takes the network and people being willing to introduce someone to someone, and right. And we just have to. Right now, I don't feel that there's any of that in place to help anybody.
I couldn't agree more. I think we do need a lot of government funding or some focus on this industry, which I doubt we're going to get anytime soon. But in the meantime, I think nonprofits like even FGI Toronto, where under which we are doing this whole conversation, I think that's also a great way to amplify our voice. And I think it's a product of passion. It's not like we are making profit out of it, but it's a product of passion that brings us all here to talk about it and amplify our voices to actually help people out there and actually make something on their own and make a name in the Canadian industry rather than going elsewhere to find support. So this is, I think, a little way that we can contribute to the industry, and all the local organizations like FGI, TFI, or Ryerson's Fashion Zone, all these communities are trying to help out those small startups in the fashion industry. And I think for now, that's the way to go about it. If somebody's looking for help to make a name or to start something out or even scale up. And that actually brings me to my last question for the evening. And I would love to know, we've spoken about the fashion in Toronto, fashion in Vancouver, Quebec, Winnipeg, different regions, how it's different from each other. But I would like to bring all of this together to talk about the fashion in Canada. What is the one thing that makes Canadian fashion? Is it like... maybe like a few adjectives, if you want to say what you think describes Canadian fashion, maybe to the outside world and to the people who are living here. Obviously, it's different for different regions, but maybe there's one thing that ties everything together. So I'm looking for that. So maybe we could start with you, Amanda, this time.
Okay, I'm gonna take advantage of that question just to talk about a little bit more about Indigenous fashion, because obviously that's something that is my special interest. I'm by no means an expert in it, which is an advantage for me, because I I'm learning all the time as I work with different people. Speaking to funding, when I was doing some of the promo dates on Killers of the Flower Moon, I was looking for handbags, which are pretty hard to source, especially as loners. And I was speaking to this wonderful designer called Kaya Heitland. She runs a brand called Indigenous Nouveau. It's mostly beadwork and some beautiful tan pieces. She had these wonderful medicine bags, and I was like, oh, I'm really crazy about your medicine bags. I wish I had a handbag that looked like that, and she said, well, when do you need it by? And so she made this prototype of an evening clutch based on a traditional Métis medicine bag that I then took with me to New York. So it's been New York, Toronto, LA, been seen all over. Looked really amazing. And she actually was able to access a grant from, I'm going to just check this on my phone. Sorry, I was looking earlier to make sure I get it right. So from the First Peoples Cultural Council, she was able to secure some grant funding. And so she's actually got, I think, 3 or 4 pieces now that she's produced, which are beautiful. They retail around $4,000. They're in her private collection. They're museum quality pieces. And they're super special. And as far as I know, they're the first of their kind. They're the first, just because they're the first that I've seen doesn't mean they're totally the first of their kind, but they are incredibly special. And it really got me thinking about our Indigenous designers here and how, by and large, most of what's being designed is being designed and produced here. It's being produced ethically. It's being produced by communities that are being helped by having the employment, or the artisans themselves. So we have, what elsewhere we would call like a cottage industry. We have this cottage industry where we've got these Indigenous designers who are making museum quality pieces. They're giving back to their local economy, hyper local, to people they know. And producing these pieces that are super, super special and super significant, and that are also kind of moving their disciplines forward. And it's all being done here. And to me, that is incredibly exciting. That drives me to want to do more, to want to meet more people. It's not, necessarily about the jobs for me. It's about being able to have the opportunity to have these conversations with people and say, hey, what about this? And then watch them go and watch them bloom and watch them produce these things that are made in Canada that are super special and couldn't possibly come from anywhere else. And that's why I do what I do.
Absolutely love it. Brilliant. What do you think, Shayne? What is Canadian fashion to you?
I love that because I think that's so important. I think Canadian fashion to me is like an evolving thing. It's diversity is what I'm starting to see a lot of. Really cool because I think that represents the people and this country. So I would say, to me, it's starting to look like that. But I think Amanda brought up a really good point in terms of Canada doesn't promote made in Canada the way that it should, right? That is such an important comment. Made in Italy, there's a documentary I saw years and years ago. It was really a marketing ploy. Like this whole quality being Italian and stuff like that. Sure, there's great fabrics and stuff like that. Yes. But the whole made in Italy as being this, like this was after the war trying to drive up business. It was more marketing than anything else. We've never, as a country, done a good job of promoting made in Canada. And I think that that is a great place to start in terms of like, how do we promote pride in the industry, in these items, in the manufacturing that exists here, right? Because that's going to be the key right there, is sort of creating a sense of pride in the fact that things are made in Canada, but also getting things made in Canada and not always outsourcing because it's cheap. So there's like that's a whole thing. That's like a whole other podcast to unpack. But I think that's a really important comment, is I don't think that Canada is doing a good job. And I don't know who is supposed to be in charge of doing that, but I would say the government needs to do a better job. That's just an easy person, group to shout at. But I mean, it needs to do a better job of like promoting made in Canada. And like I said before, investing in manufacturing and blah, 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 because that's where this industry is going to grow and support and thrive. So I think that was a really important point. And what do I see as Canadian fashion? I mean, like I said, I think it's the diversity, and there's something cool about the fact that it's regional. Like when I go visit my family, not this year, but like last year's minus 35, right? I mean, I needed a crazy parka. We have this massive country that's really unique with different groups of people in different places that have different, that have come from different places that have different cultures and whatnot. And I think it can be some of the most interesting and exciting fashion to move forward if we can support and help it to grow.
Absolutely. And I think if you ask about consumers, I think they have a lot of support local mindset, and they want to support brands that are producing locally. But we do need some support from the government and from maybe the private community as well, to support Canadian fashion, locally made fashion. So absolutely agree on that. What do you think, Lolitta? What's Canadian fashion?
It's hard to add something here, but I would definitely say that I totally agree. We need to do a better job, because people, how they see fashion in Canada is not much more than, like I said, the Canadian tuxedo. That's what we hear, and obviously it's not that. I was there's an artisan salon here in Montreal called Le Salon des Métiers d'Art, and Quebec was the honored nation at the International Métiers d'Art in Paris this summer, and I was there because I'm the ambassador for the salon, and we had this Indigenous curated section that featured 9 or 10 Indigenous artists, and through them and how people saw us over there. It's interesting when you go somewhere else and you get the feedback of other people and how they see you. And whatever, I know it wasn't fashion specifically, it was art in general. But the way they saw us is creativity that has no boundaries. That's what came out the most. Because like, let's say in France, you go to l'école des métiers d'art and you do things the way it's supposed to be done, but we don't have these kinds of limits here. So it was really interesting to see how we were showcased through the Indigenous artisans and artists that were there. And I think that right now, where there's finally people are starting to, maybe sometimes by guilt, obviously, but are starting to see the importance in celebrating Indigenous culture. I think that it's something that we should be putting forward, because it's true that if it's something that is made by artisans in Canada with Canadian material, it is what's been done by Indigenous designers. I was at an Indigenous fashion show yesterday featuring Jason Berg and Caroline Monet. Yes, and it was really beautiful, and it was so beautiful to see how something that has existed forever and been done for forever is so modern. And I think that maybe it's Amanda has it right on, that that's what we should be kind of focusing on, because maybe that's what distinguishes us the most, especially right now where we kind of have more of a conscience about that.
Absolutely.
My heart's so happy.
I know. Love that. This conversation, I think I learned so much, and I could go on for hours, but I really want to thank you guys for joining me today, and for this very insightful discussion. So thank you, Amanda, Shayne, Lolitta, for making this a very productive conversation. And before wrapping it up, I do want to ask, if viewers want to learn more about your work, where could they go? Maybe Amanda, you could go first.
Hi. Okay, so if you want to know about me, my website is www.amandamay.daily.com, and I am also on Instagram as Amanda May Daly. Oh, awesome. Daily, and Daily is DALY. There's no I in there. It's not a newspaper.
Okay, great. Great. We'll make sure we tag the right handles. Cool. What about you, Lolitta?
So I would say Instagram, just because it's the easiest. So it's my name. So it's Lolitta with 2 T's, LOLITTA DANDOY. And I would say that just because most of the things that I do and the work that I do, I kind of, share it through there. So it's an easy way. Okay. It's an easy way also to, to talk and make contacts. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. What about you, Shayne?
Same thing. I think Instagram is probably easiest. It's just my name, Shayne Stephens. And then if you want to read anything, you can just go to the Kid or the Toronto Star and Google my name, and some stuff will pop up.
Awesome. Perfect. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe for the next one in the series, leave a comment, and share with others. Until next time, stay fashionable.